But anyway, that was the first thing that you mentioned, was that you would sit down after your meditation and then you would remember to breathe. Is that where that came from?
Yeah, yeah. Or really, if I'm walking around doing something, I mean, I'll try to note from habit, going, but maybe I'll forget, and um, then I'll realize I'm thinking of something completely useless. Well, not useless, but not conducive. And then I'll look to I'll turn my attention to the breath, and there's a short breath. So then I just make the intention to have a nice long breath, but then sometimes it does feel quite forced.
Okay. That quite false, then could you call that doubt?
I'll repeat it. I feel like I'm putting in almost too much effort into bringing the breath back to long breathing.
Okay.
It feels too gross.
All right. So you've reached your limit. Congratulations on going to that point. Most don't get up off the couch to run around the house even. So if you've reached your limit, then that's good, because that means that you're putting some time and dedication into it, which is bound to bring what the Buddha promised with Anapanasati is that it is a great fruit, great benefit.
See, I'm sort of, and I know it's something to investigate during the meditation of the wanting of progression. I I feel like even the first two steps alone uh, is it in a sense, but I am getting stuck at about the fourth step. Then pity might arise for a short amount of time. Usually there's a natural smile and some joy, but the first day I practiced from after speaking with you, the pity was so strong and came so quickly, but now it's actually very hard to keep it there.
Never
Maybe
mind.
impermanence? Just
Not
something
only
to.
that, but perhaps it was, how to say it, like something was on a high shelf and you needed that boost, something like a stepping stool that you could step up on so that you could get what you were looking for. Now that you've gotten what you're looking for, now the stepping stool has made its exit. That's one way of, in other words, it's done its job if the intention is to bring you to the state of satisfaction. Because pity, though it is often experienced as feeling, it still creates the attitude of can do. We can do this. This this is a job that is being well done. Okay. And so that's actually the benefit of that, let us call that the rapturous quality, or the subtle vibrations in the body, but that they will come and go. Oh, when they are there, note them well, and when they are not, don't long for them. That's an important quality. Is if you want that to come back, now you're creating an extra level of suffering, calling I want something that I don't have, rather than learning to be really satisfied with what you do have right now. That's really the essence of the teaching. And so if the rapture is not so strong, now you at least know that it exists. You've experienced it for yourself. No longer a doubt about its existence. But now the question is it mine? And the answer then to that question is no, or at least not yet, or at least when it is had, it won't be yours. I know that last one was confusing. um,
I can see into that a little bit, because it's that dropping of seeing things as self that kind of cuts through the I can't remember what you called them, the 12 links of dependent origination.
that's exactly right. And in fact, there's many different levels, or if you can think of it as links of chain, then the part of the investigation is to pick it up one link at a time back to the primary elements.
I was trying. I've been reading some Buddhadasa and his Anapanasati, and sometimes I work with I experiment with the instructions in his book. Sometimes I work with the instructions from Thanissaro. Usually, if I feel like there's some dullness after a long sit, like towards the end, then I'll just think, okay, I'll start over from the beginning, and long breath, short breath, and work back through it, but using Tanissaro's method or instructions. And that will usually bring quite a lot of pity. Yeah.
How is what Thanissaro teaches different than either what you've heard from me or the
Well, that's the funny thing. It's not different at all. It's the same Anapanasati. I wrote it down. I try to just write down whatever's helpful after a sit. So I wrote, can connect Buddhadasa's method with Tanissaro's long, short, whole, calm, piti, sukha. It's pretty much the same thing, but maybe I don't know. Tanissaro's is going through each part of the body to see what kind of breath is better. Well, what brings happiness. Whereas Buddhadasa, I think there's the point. It's more of feeling the sensations of the short breath as the abdomen rising, and the long breath as the chest kind of rising, and then feeling the beginning, the middle, and the ends, and seeing just feeling that through, And then once that's seen and you've got concentration on that, switching to the concentration to the point of the nose or the lip, and kind of keeping that at the forefront while trying to calm down the bodily formations with the breath. But that's quite tricky. I'm still working on that.
Okay. Don't start working on that. There's other things that almost may have been intentionally left out.
Okay.
Okay. And in that regard, go back to the original part of what you were saying in the sense of getting to know the body as an overall arching umbrella or an overall view. Then each of these teachers are just looking at the body from a particular viewpoint. And now you've got two different viewpoints to look at it and recognize, wow, you've got quite a complex toy here to play with, to get to know. And you can do that in some ways with doing Goenka's scanning method. And also that has quite a lot to do with the rising, falling, touching, sitting of the Mahasi. It all fits together, but it's just different ways of speaking or even conceptualizations of something that they're all kind of pointing at. And I think that that's really marvelous. That's almost the magic quality of it is that they're all singing the same song in harmony with one another while we're trying to pick apart. His note is different than his note, as it goes along. So if you begin to see that quality to it, that will make it even more or a kind of a deeper knowledge or a broader knowledge that gives you a higher view and also gives you, that is kind of the status that one of such a high view deserves, because here you are. Okay. Beginning to see things in a noble way, in the sense of instead of seeing a pile of junk, it's now a jigsaw puzzle that needs to be put together. They're all part of the same picture. And that's one of the reasons why students should have more than one teacher, many teachers.
Mm.
Okay.
That reminds me of something, although it's quite tricky to talk about because it can go into the territory of, is it Dhamma, is it not Dhamma, but
It's
or is
all
it Buddha? Is
it's
it yeah,
all
all things, all
how
things. I mean,
big
is it
your
Buddha
view is
Dhamma?
all Dhamma. How
Yeah.
big is your view?
Okay. Yeah, you're right. But when I was studying English literature, I picked up a book by James Joyce called Finnegan's Wake.
Okay.
And that was a very, very interesting book, barely written in English. I think he studied about 30 different languages and mashed them all together, but you could still read it as if it was English, but it did make more sense if you read it out loud. And in that, there's this archetypal character who's kind of who's represented as the earth as opposed to water, and his story is likened to the story of Humpty Dumpty falling off the wall, smashing into a million pieces, and then but there's something that he was accused for, and everybody's trying to find these pieces and join them back together again to understand the whole picture. Yeah, it's a great book, but I'm not sure if it's
Yeah.
worth even reading anymore. I'm not.
Analogy sounds like the analogy of every young man's mind.
Yeah.
that is all in pieces and tatters, and we somehow got to get this mismatched together to the point that the gravity takes over beyond a doubt and it coheses. This is, in fact, what the Buddha meant by unification of mind.
Mm.
Just let's put that big mess together again. Yes, it seems like it's in pieces, but we can figure out how to put it back together again. And that's one of the reasons for being able to hear many different teachers, is so you can begin to see how to put things together. I learned things from Muktananda that I didn't even understand until I had gotten the Bhikkhu Buddhadasa.
You learned things from who or what?
Muktananda. I was with Muktananda for a while in India back in the 70s.
I'm not aware of that teacher.
He's dead now, but their meditation is on the blue pearl with Kundalini rising and all of that kind of stuff, using little sitting organs to play their music and tabula and all of that kind of stuff.
Mm.
We've got a student beginning, about to join, but I think he doesn't want to be recorded, so I'll let that one slide. So anyway, a way of introducing kind of a new topic, we're looking at beginning to understand what we would consider unwholesome thoughts as opposed to the wholesome thoughts, in the regard that that's what the junk mind normally is doing, and that it is in doing so in the hindrance of being here now. It's sort of like where the mind is spinning when we're not paying close attention. So this is what is referred to as the hindrances, right? You've heard that word, okay?
Yeah, yeah.
And that all five of the hindrances fit into a package, so that you could think of it in this way: is that the package that we will call hindrance is probably nicks and corners and places where these five don't fill up, that would still be hindrances, because we want to see hindrances as anything that in fact does hinder. An example right now is that coronavirus this and 19 that and all of that, except that everyone can find something to be afraid of. And now this is the new socialized way of fear, is that people are becoming afraid, while a great deal of people are trying to ignore what's really going on. And neither one of them are taking the noble way, which is to find out what's really going on, figure out what the precautions are that are necessary, and take those precautions, making yourself as safe as possible. And now there's nothing to worry about. So
Fear is dependent on feeling, right? Is fear part of the package of dukkha?
yes, in some ways, the Buddha even recognizes it, and certainly within uh, the science world, in several different nooks and crannies, like uh, the self-preservation instinct is the primary instinct, and its primary activities has to do with setting the body up for fear or with fear. And that the first thing that happens is that the body freezes because it may be a predator. Okay, this is actually instantaneous stuff that happens. That part of the brain is much quicker at reacting to potential dangers, making a whole lot of false positives. But hopefully, the wisdom part of the brain comes in very quickly, actually figuring out that there, in fact, is no danger.
Yeah, you mentioned something about predators. It's the reptilian part of the brain which controls the breathing. But yeah, the hindrances are treated like predators. Like I have noticed, like for example, from the previous example of walking around the apartment and suddenly realizing that the hindrance has arisen and my breath is very short. Well, sometimes it's not just the short breath, it's that I was breathing long, but then I kind of stopped and forgot at the end of the breath, and I'm just kind of holding the breath while paying attention to a hindrance.
Okay.
Yeah, like
Victor
frozen.
Buddhadasa actually would refer to that then the prison of life or the prison of the mind, that we temporarily get trapped and have to go to jail. Then all of a sudden we're sprung free and we're smart again. And then through fear or whatever, we get trapped again and thrown back in jail, which the Buddha referred to this as woeful states. That jail is almost an acronym. One of the woeful states is hell.
Mm.
But hell is, let us say, the jail of anger or the jail of anxiety, of wanting to fight but have nothing to fight with or to. And so we kind of get into panic mode. That's hell. And it's just one of the mental states that we get into. Now, the direction of going into those states is that borderline, that area between what is hindrance and what is freedom of choice. That's actually an analogy would be waking up out of a nightmare. Is wake up out of this, get out of
Yeah,
this thing. Uh, but the nightmare is just something that's been created in our own minds. Um, there's an interesting way of looking at it, and that is this: that now that you have begun the noble path and are practicing the noble mind, your standards get higher and higher. But you are always not living up to that standard. Therefore, any kind of old memories you will have will wind up being not up to your own standards, giving you the possibility of feeling bad. Just ordinary memories now become not there. There would be a better way. There's always what happens in the mind. These old memories come up. So this is part of the Buddha's reason for leaving the past alone, because it's fraught with the dangers of you comparing yourself to the past versus who you are now. And we want to kind of make a separation between the two, hopefully down to a fundamental level. So now even the way we feel and the way we see things is a much higher, nobler, higher quality way of doing it down through each step of the Paticca. And so this is part of then the path, especially that in that regard of the Sankara, which is both one of the five aggregates and also it's mentioned quite strongly as the second aspect of the Paticca Samuppada. Now we can trudge right down that pathway and go right into Paticca Samuppada right now, but I would rather stay back at that level of hindrances because there's some interesting things to look at there. Because ultimately, you could even go so far as to say that the way that the mind works, that winds up in dukkha, part of the dukkha is that ouch feeling we have from stabbing ourselves with an old thought or an old memory that is now not up to our standards. We could have done it better, is part of the language of it. So we begin to blame ourselves and feel more and more guilty when in fact that's not the practice at all. But now we recognize, wait a minute, I've been doing that my whole life. You mean I can't do that no more? The answer is no, you can't do that no more. You can't wallow around in the past feeling bad about it, feeling guilty and suffering and thinking about what a jerk. And just wallowing being a victim because that's a hindrance. So you could even go so far as to say that the hindrance is very much like an attitude. Now, in Sutta number 39 in the Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha lays out 5 analogies or 5 stories about the hindrances. Now, I have an idea that not all of the hindrances map onto each one by one, so that there's one analogy for one hindrance and another analogy for another hindrance, but rather like that all of these 5 qualities are the qualities that we come to in the mind when we become free from these hindrances. And so I don't even know if I'll give them in the right order, but it really doesn't matter. The first hindrance is like being sick and being hindered by the illness itself as an analogy, and then getting free from sick so that we feel better. People generally feel a whole lot better the day they leave the hospital than the day that they go into the hospital. That's part of what we mean by that. So that feeling better. So having the mind cleaned out of hindrance, that's part of the quality. Another quality is like with the hindrance, it's like being in jail and then getting out of jail. Why? Because once we get locked into a kind of progression of thoughts, they keep bouncing around in a particular area and we get lost in there. And so we get locked into this whole thought process system. And so becoming free from the hindrances is like getting a get out of jail free card. All we have to do is accept that card, say thank you very much, and I'm out of here. All right. So the next analogy is like being in debt. I don't know if have you ever been in debt, or are you in debt now?
No, I accidentally went over an overdraft limit one time, but that only lasted maybe 2 days, I think.
And how did you feel when that happened?
Not good. I had to rely on my parents to bail me out because I wasn't going to get paid until well, yeah, some time.
Okay, so how did you feel about that?
Not good.
Not
Have
good
it, yeah.
enough right there.
Okay.
But getting it paid off after you got it straightened out, how did you feel?
Relieved.
Okay, so excuse me. This is how then the analogy works. It being actually relieved of a burden. that we were carrying. And much of the U.S. now, the young people, for one reason or another, are deeply in debt, much for school loans and whatnot. Uh, and so they've got a real burden, and they would like to be free from that burden. So what we're talking about here is part of the burden that we carry, part of the debt load that we have, is every little dirty wrong thing we've ever done in the past needs somehow to be fixed. That we owe it to ourselves to lead such a righteous life that we've got to go clean up mistakes that everybody involved with are now dead. In other words, I'm talking about magical thinking of cleaning up a past that's dead and gone and cannot be cleaned up. It can only be imagined. And here I am frustrated. Now that was happening to me when I was your age. Imagine what happening to you if you don't clean your mind out. How you're going to be when you're 70 years old, with a whole lifetime of regrets. And so that's part of the reason that it's such a hindrance of off into the past. Um, so after we get out of debt, that means now we're free to live in this present moment. We're not burdened by the past anymore. We don't owe it anything. We can say, thank you very much for got me to this point, but now off you go. And so just doing that in the mind, secluding ourselves from the past, is a way of getting out of debt, getting out of jail, and uh, getting free from illness. So all of these analogies fit very much with every one of them. Um, the next one on the list is uh, the analogy of being a servant or being a for hire laborer, or in nowadays world, it would be thinking of as being an employee. And that means that every day you got to get up and you got to go someplace and you got to do something and you got to continue to do it and you got to get along with the people, and a whole lot of rules going on here. And we do that day after day after day after day, all day long. All right. So we're actually living in that regard as kind of an animal existence or servants. And so coming out of that mentality, and that, by the way, it starts in childhood and it's built right into our nature down at the instinctual level of being an animal, that is part of the woeful states that it's talked about, of doing what you're told to do and not liking it, also rises up in the form of a hindrance. And part of that is being dissatisfied with the moment. And so we start to fixate on something and to say, oh, if I get that, I'll feel better. And so we look for this for that, or a trade, or sort of like, please, Mr. Common Machine, if I do blah, blah, can I get gobbledygook? And so we try to make a deal with existence. And that's one of the places where a lot of meditation students get caught, which is also part of the issue of doubt in reference to this wandering, restless mind, this worrier that's trying to fix the past and perhaps plan a better future. And all these desires and dissatisfactions all combine together so that they're sort of there any time, one at a time, adventitious. They take action whenever they can. It's like any time that an animal finds a cage door open, it will escape. Okay, and sometimes they don't know their way out, create their own door. Well, that's kind of how this stuff is from our own gnarly past, especially when we understand that it's like a thicket of views or a jungle of views that we have. And so, um, in that regard, then, being that servant to that outside world defines our relationship to the outside world. That we feel dependent upon it and therefore subservient to it and therefore under its thumb. And kind of everybody feels that way in society. And so the hindrance would be any kind of thoughts that are associated feelings that come up with that. And then free from hindrances, being free from the feeling is like, okay, I've been paid off now. I'm free to go. I don't have to live according to your uh, rights, rules, regulations, or time periods, or things to do list, or any of that kind of stuff. But I'm done with that. Now, the Westerners are really afraid that, oh, if I stop doing all I'm supposed to do, then I won't get that paycheck at the end of the week or the month. And I'm dependent upon that. I am the paycheck. And so they're caught in this bind that uh, but the question is, if you can't see this double bind, the system that we're in, then we can't get out of it. And how can we get out of it? The answer is this is a thought in the mind right now, and you can see it, you can thump it out and not think that and not feel that way right now. I can feel good right now. That used to be an old habit, but now it's not. And so that's what the analogy then is that you're no longer a servant. You have been discharged. Or you can think of it as a slave, you're free to go. And another quality then is the quality, the fifth one, not to bore you too much with this. The fifth one then is that you're out on a journey. And the analogy was like a caravan of with camels and stuff on their backs. And the camel man is taking all of his goods, and he either arrives at his final destination and home, um, or at least a wayside that he feels comfortable and safe in. So he arrives at his destination. Now he's completely in a different place. Now he feels safe, comfortable, and he's arrived with all of his packages and goods. While he was out in the desert, it was dangerous, and he had to be tense and fearful and alert because you're out in dangerous territory. And not only that, but it's hot, and you don't like being there anyway. Okay, so now we can, in fact, take that and look at just your own traveling. That whenever you arrive at the destination, that's when we begin to feel better. And while we're out on the journey, it's kind of dangerous. Really clear example of that is the high-speed catamaran boat that goes from this island to the next one over. And the Westerners are getting on there with far too much baggage. They're carrying far too much. So now they've got to worry about that baggage while they're on this boat. And will they get it back or not? And it's amazing. Now, imagine that you've got all of that baggage to look after while you're out traveling, and there's nobody to help you. You've got to manage it all. Perhaps the best thing to do is to get your amount of baggage down to the point that you can at least pick it up and carry it all. And yet we're so encumbered by things that we can't move. So we want to begin to settle down and take a load off and not have to be transporting and going someplace or another, and also the safety of having arrived and actually of coming home. And this is the fifth analogy for the hindrances. This is why sukha and piti will arise, is when the student begins to see, wow, what a relief it really is to be free from those things. And that these analogies of being sick, being in jail, being in debt, being a servant, and out on a journey is basically how we kind of live our lives. That's who we kind of think we are. And so beginning to take the mental attitude is hey man, I'm not sick. I'm good to go. I take a deep breath, even the next one after that. I'm good. Okay. And complete freedom. One of the ways that we don't have freedom is by making appointments. If you have no appointments in your life, or very, very few, I've got it down to, okay, maybe 3 or 4 a year. But that's necessary. And so we do what's necessary while wisely reducing the work that is necessary. And then life is easy after that. So, in fact, for me, dealing with the Thai government is exactly the same way as dealing with coronavirus. Figure out what needs to be done, do that needs to be done, and then forget about it. So, this is also like the freedom that we get, because in fact, in that regard, I'm being free from the hindrance. Because I tell you, I used to worry about visas. And the Thai government gives a whole lot of Westerners a whole lot of reasons to worry about visas. So anyway, back to these 5 stories, and these 5 hindrances basically cover the wall map of anything that can be done to go wrong. It will go wrong. Murphy's Law is there to grab you by the throat, and it will do at the most opportune moment. And so these 5 hindrances are to be sort of on guard for. So that this is kind of the way that we make a distinction or a definition between what's worth thinking about and what's not worth thinking about. So generally these hindrances will invite us to leave this present moment and join one of the hell worlds, or one of the animal worlds, or one of the world of hungry ghosts. Like I wanted. I had pity last month, and I worked so hard, and I can't get it no more. I can't get no pity faction. And so, yes, that's it. That's the hindrance. And when we can see that as a hindrance, we can say, aha, I grabbed you by the throat.
Is the analogy or metaphor given by the Buddha of the armies of Mara? That's the same thing, right? As seeing the feeling and seeing it for what it is immediately, and going back to happiness.
The word is not actually best understood as army,
Ah, okay.
best understood as host.
Hosts.
And an also decent definition would be group or crowd.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hard. Hard. Hard.
I'm sorry, I can only
H-O-A-R-D.
hordes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, that's exactly right. Hordes. That word is, in fact, the one that then gets easily placed into armies.
Ah, okay. I see. I see.
One of the major distinctions are that the armies tend to be organized, but this crowd is not organized. They
Mhm.
are a horde or a host in the sense that each one of them will just climb through whatever hole in the fence he can find
Mm.
in your defenses. And so we can then call them adventitious defilements. That's the term that these guys used in their translations. But it means when the defilement takes advantage, when it finds some loophole, some advantage, some way of calling in some memory that pops up, then takes from A to B and leaps around like a monkey mind into a real mess. Now we feel bad because we thought of something that happened 10 years ago. And so uh, what we do is begin to say, okay, we're not going to let the mind do that so much. We're not going to let the monkey mind bounce around because it's most likely to bounce into hindrance land. We're going to keep it kind of focused as best we can most of the time. As we improve, that time frame will change. We're beginning to ride the teeter totter that's better balanced than it used to be. Or it's against uh, that's very interesting in the analogy is that when people start, it's all me all the time on one side of the teeter totter board, and it's uh, not me on the other end of it. It's everybody else's, but it's not me. And as we begin to push stuff away, in the sense, oh no, this is really not me. Body is not me. Feelings not me. Sankara not me. Consciousness not me. Perception not me. The five aggregates not me. This is not who I am. We begin to stack a whole lot of stuff over on the other side of that teeter totter. Now it becomes more balanced, and we can begin to get lifted off into the air. So that's a way of thinking about it. Um, and that we do that with every thought. Then instead of keeping it on this side of the teeter totter, we toss it over there. And pretty soon, the stuff gets over on the other side. Things get lighter and lighter on this side. And our life is no longer so heavy.
So just seeing the arising for a flash that's beneficial for the practice, right?
Yes. Go on.
Well, there was an interesting thing on Dhammarato's writing where he said, before you begin to practice, um, take the longest long breath you can possibly take, and see how long you can do that for. And then take the shortest short breath you can take. And really, we don't want a long short breath. For at least from my understanding.
Yes. Did you? Who is it that said this?
Did I said did I say your name? My mistake. But Buddhadasa.
Buddhadasa. Okay.
And that's how you begin the practice. But if you indulge in the hindrance that arises, then that's not the path.
No,
But
that's one of
if
the big
you,
differences between
yeah,
the choiceless awareness crowd, which lets that hindrance remain in the mind and just be aware of what's going on, to
mm,
where the Buddha's teaching is no. First, we've got to start making some distinction between what's wholesome and what is not wholesome.
yeah.
And when we check that is actually not wholesome, then we sort of throw it out right now.
So if
This is
that
not the
unwholesome
right
thought
time.
that arises is
Pardon?
just, so if that unwholesome thought or hindrance that arises, but it's only there for, a blip, you
If
know,
if you're
and you
sharp,
see it immediately
you're sharp.
as, yeah,
You're getting
then
sharp, and now you
yeah.
can see that you can catch it when it comes up as a blip.
Mm,
That's excellent point. That's a good way of saying it. The blips are not going to stop, at least not in the foreseeable future. But the rate will slow down. But your job is to every time a blip comes up, it's only a blip, and it is not a full blown pity party.
yeah. Hmm.
And that's an excellent way of beginning to practice correctly. Is to begin to see things that are not wholesome and catch them quickly, especially in the sense of we can actually corral or wall whole thoughts systems off, like a place you used to live and the time that you lived there. Just that's out of bounds now. No reason to go back to that place in that time and muck around with something that's sharp and dangerous.
Yeah.
And so we begin to wall things off from the past so that we continue to work with this present moment as our understanding of this present moment begins to grow. Because this present moment is really vast. It's unbelievably vast. It cannot be described as how vast it is. I'm surprised they call it stream entry. Yeah, if you're a bug in the stream, it's like a roaring flood.
Mm,
And so that's a better way to look at it is to flood. In fact, that's what the Buddha talks about. This the Dhamma is like building a raft
mm.
so that we can navigate that flood, get to the other shore. That's in Sutra number 22, the simile of the raft. And there it's actually referred to as a flood. And in the beginning of practice, the hindrances actually begin to look like that you're flooded with them. Like they take over so easy. Just there they come again. The whole horde of them, a whole mess, a whole flood of them coming. And so being being alert or being awake or being on guard or uh, being ready for anything. This is actually that first state that the Buddha talks about that is noble. This is the first knowledge that I can handle this stuff. No matter how much of that horde sneaks through that fence right now, I'm going to clobber them all. They're not going to tear me from limb to limb and carry me off into whatever wilderness that they hide in. You know, this is my territory now. Okay, so that's that first knowledge, that can-do attitude. And so becoming aware of that group of hindrances as a crowd or as a horde or taking advantage in all kinds of ways and from all kinds of places to, to, to trigger you or to flick you into thinking about that kind of stuff rather than being in the present moment. Because most people are in that kind of mental world. And so they really, in It's like the staff is in the hull of the ship watching an old movie about the ship instead of out on deck watching where the ship is going and steering the ship. That's a way of looking at it. Yeah, the crew's in the basement watching a movie.
Yeah, I was thinking about sort of well, you can't really say control, but more so the guidance that is given by would it be Sati? It's hard to say, or maybe it's the whole seven factors. Um, but the idea of the Buddha being called the turner of the wheel of the Dhamma,
Hmm.
and the symbolism of well, actually, it's quite interesting how the Nazis had the backwards one. You know, the symbol, like looks
Yeah,
like a windmill.
the swastika.
Yeah, yeah, but the one the one that's sometimes shown on Buddhist iconography, how that's almost kind of a wheel, right? Is it?
Well, here's the point. If uh, I won't, I won't give you any guessing games. Imagine that on a stick you have two bars going up and down, and on each one of those bars is 4 points. You then attach a rocket to that bar so that you have four rockets going around, and now you have the device that you're talking about. Except that those what looks like broken legs of a cross are actually intentionally um, uh, not parallel, 90-degree angle from uh, the pinwheel. So this, yeah, that's the word for it, pinwheel.
Mm,
Okay, this is an Asian pinwheel.
mm.
Been there for centuries now. Which direction does it go?
Clockwise, right?
It goes according to your own view. Imagine,
Ah, yeah, of course, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But
So it
yeah,
if you have it on a fence, it depends upon which side of the fence you're on as to which direction it goes. So it goes both ways.
mm,
The Third Reich, being who they were trying to steal something, and so they stole a particular version, and the right owner has been trying to retrieve it, kind of unsuccessfully ever since.
mm.
But it's not necessarily Buddhist. But yeah, the swastika, uh, and that when it is set on fire and spinning as a pinwheel, then that can be reminiscent of the Dhammachaka or the wheel of the Dhamma because it's spinning around and around and around, which is quite remarkable in the sense that these rockets are put in place uh, in 90-degree angles. So this 90-degree angle pinwheel, how can it go in a circle? So that's part of the mystery. It's got magic built into it. Um, if you go back enough far in time. So
Yeah, yeah.
um, the Dhammachaka wheel, then the turning of the wheel of the Dhamma uh, is like bringing out the new teaching about this getting out of jail, getting out of the hospital, getting free from debt, getting away from servitude, and uh, feel like that you're home already rested and that everything is sabai and you haven't lost any goods out on the trail, but you're at home at last. Okay. So this is actually the feeling state that is engendered from freedom of the hindrances. And so this is the Dhamma. This is the being free from suffering, finding our mind in a state that's really good and fixed and relaxed. Because everyone in the world is out looking for this, but they're all looking for it in the wrong places. There's an old song that I heard that I just thought was so funny. Looking for love in all the wrong places, looking for love, Southern Girl. And that's exactly what we do full time. We're out there looking for love in all the wrong places. And most of the choices about what places we're going to be looking for it in is based in this set of hindrances that tend to drive the show. But now you're going to bring your mind out of that kind of thinking every time that you recognize that you're in it and bring your mind to a higher state. And that's what the practice is all about, is let's, at least for this moment, be noble. Let's practice doing that. Let's practice being in charge of this here expedition instead of one of the donkeys in the back of the line, which is where most people feel. And so and this is all about that change in attitude. So in a way, the big question is, can you be free from these hindrances?
It's hard to say. Well, the can-do attitudes, I'm sure, will help, but it's not about the hindrances. It's about the attitude to the hindrances, right? Or perhaps the relationship to the hindrances.
Perhaps that's closer, right? That these things are interconnected. Do you have the quality of throwing the hindrances out? It's almost the same thing as asking, do you have the attitude to throw them out? Here comes a possibility, like the renter can't pay her rent for whatever reason, and the house manager has compassion and won't throw her out. And the big boss comes by and says, "Go throw her out." And the manager says, "Yes, boss." When the boss leaves, he doesn't throw her out. This is how most people, because in fact, that crowd of people that I just talked about, the individual is all three of those players. Isn't that remarkable? Yeah. We're the big boss that comes in and says, "You stop those hindrances right this very minute."
Yeah.
And then the lazy part of the mind comes in and says, "Well, okay, maybe soon." And then we get lost again. Meanwhile, there's also that part over in the corner saying, "Oh, I should be paying my rent. I should be throwing out hindrances." And so we wind up being all of the actors in our own play. And that part of then the unification of mind that we've been talking about is to see those various pieces, see the rule maker. In fact, we'll talk more about that next time when we get into Freud. But the whole point is of these hindrances is that if we can be free from the hindrances, that's almost all that needs to be done. What left is there? Because we're quite joyous and happy, and to now we're smart as a tack and ready to go, full of vim, vigor, life, and yippity doo dah, and willing to handle anything. That's the kind of life that I think everybody would like to live if they had a chance or a choice. But then we wind up looking for name and fame, thinking that that will give it to us. And there's even a few movies about guys who have, through very bizarre behavior, exhibited that sort of quality of trying to be free by acting inappropriately in social situations. But playfulness in the right place, come to think of it, almost everywhere is the right place to be playful. But having a playful attitude, well, a playful attitude means that there's nothing here that can hurt us. So it's a fearless place, a fearless attitude. When we're playful, that means that everything is good to go, that this is not a dangerous place. I don't have to be on guard for any social faux pas or anything. I can just be rowdy and love it. And so this is then the state that we're looking for, is to be free from all of those rules, rituals, ways of doing things. And this is, in fact, what the Buddha would call the second fetter, the sila bhatta paramasa, which is you've got to behave, boy. You can't go off and have fun and have a good life. You've got to stay here and build a house.
What's that often translated as? Because I don't recognize.
Sila bhatta paramasa.
Sila, isn't that morality?
Yes, that's exactly it. Morality then becomes the burden.
Yeah, yeah.
Because somebody's got a line in their morality, say, thou shalt not play. Yeah, so that's also part of the freedom, is the freedom to be free from all of the rules. What rules? Every rule that you picked up along the way. Every new thing you learned about how to do stuff and put into that bag is what the Buddha refers to now as the sankhara. And we cling to that bag, and that's called sila bhatta paramasa. Clinging to the way that it ought to be, or clinging the way of the past, or whatnot like that. Some people call them conservatives.
Is that a joke? I'm not big on American politics. I generally gave up on politics a long time ago.
Actually, when I was thinking of conservatism, I'm talking about it in a world view rather than a political. So now it looks like that those who hold a conservative worldview have now all aligned themselves together in the same political party. And that used to not be the case. But now that organization shift has occurred. But what I'm actually meaning by conservative are those who think that they have
walls around things, right?
They have something to lose. The ones who go into protection mode.
Yeah.
And that's what we mean by conservative, to conserve. And anybody who's not willing to conserve, therefore, must be liberal. And also the enemy, because everybody should conserve. And one of the things that people want to conserve is their status, or their well-being, or their extra special benefits in court just by their race, or many different things like that. The religion that they have gives them a lot of benefit, but that benefit now is dwindling. And they don't like it very much when states order churches closed in the United States. That really hurts their revenues. And so a lot of churches want to resist that. Churches are actually the ones that seem outstanding in that group of businesses that would object to the closures that the government is asking for. So There, then, the conservative ones, you see, are the ones who don't want to see it coming. They're trying to protect themselves, and so that's the ostrich with the head buried in the sand mentality
Mm.
that also can be seen like in a Dracula 19. You can, in fact, call this Dracula 19, where they're holding a crucifix up to a front. Look at it coming. Giving them the business as usual mentality, where many, many other people uh, are beginning to respond to it with both fear and rage. How dare those kids and whatnot stay on the beach in Florida? And by the way, they did close the beach. They were going to keep it open 4 more days, but now they've closed it completely in Florida to get people to disperse. So also the youth were given the idea that they were immune to it because of the Chinese virus was affecting mostly just elderly in China. But that may have been other things that the youth began to get really sick in Italy, and when the Italian uh, information began to show that young people are especially susceptible, even more so than the elderly as a group. Wow. So good luck for all those kids that were out there on that on the
Mm.
beaches pretending that they were immune or somehow going to be okay with it, as well as the fact that they could become carriers anyway. So now I'm looking at it just simply from the perspective of what each one of us needs to do is to think through this wisely, figure out what actually does need to be done. And one of those things then would be to get yourself into isolation as best you can so that you can are around other people as little as possible. And all we can do then is hope that the Corona 19 doesn't jump through Skype.
Mm.
I think we're fairly safe there.
Mm.
I have not seen anywhere an electronic transmission of a virus. That one they haven't come up with yet.
Mm.
That receiver's got to be a doozy. So, uh, getting away is one of the primary things. Staying away from other people, washing one's hands, uh, whenever remotely necessary, wearing a face mask. But then there's reasons for people to get even more equipment than that, or whatever we need to do in the environment that we're in to get safe. Use our mind and figure out what needs to be done. And after we are safe, then we stay safe. And that's what it means, in fact, to stay alone. I hope, in fact, a whole lot of people begin to enjoy themselves. But
Mm.
this looks like a really interesting time for a whole lot of people to take a break, be on vacation. Maybe we could do some mass anapanasati
Mm.
by the millions. That would be good. Help people out to enjoy their lives. Maybe they don't even want to go back to work. So the um, the vast amount of people who are even doing the right thing are still freaked out about it because they're so confused. They don't know what to do, and they're still not dealing directly with their own fear. They don't have enough, uh, let us say, practice like we have been practicing to begin to control the feelings so that after we intellectually figure out what needs to be done, now we can settle that part of the mind down. Down, boy, be okay. Okay. So, in that regard, we can begin to do that with anything. That down boy is actually a way of speaking about any of the hindrances. And so that whatever the situation is, talking about coronavirus right now, but that actually applies to anything. And so the hindrances in are kind of a broad featured. Anything that's going to keep you from feeling really good right now, be mindful of that so you can throw it out of your mind and come back to this present moment so that you can play with all these toys that you've gotten from all these master teachers. And when thoughts come up, recognize that the thoughts come up. A lot of students, by the way, talk about it in the sense that, oh, I can still watch my breath, but I've got all of this background stuff going on. The answer is yes, you do. Start paying attention to what that stuff is, because that's the junk thoughts
Yeah.
that we need to learn to control.
I've heard that as delusion concentration.
Yeah, so we begin to take control of those thoughts in the sense of, okay, if you got to think about something, think about what's going on. Think about the leg, think about your hands, think about what you're doing. Think about this breath, think about that one, think about how good you feel right now. Those are the kinds of new kinds of thoughts to have that are localized with in the sense of this moment is a sense of well-being. This moment is good enough.
Yeah, there was one instruction, again, instruction, it's quite tricky with the language, but the instruction for I think it was for the for the third step of Anapanasati, watching the whole, is it the whole body or the whole breath?
Actually, to be honest with you, in the actual Pali, it's just the whole body.
Okay, let's
But
stick with that.
that some teachers restrict it to merely the body of breath, which would be the lower abdomen up through the nostril and air area from here down to there. Okay. So,
What if
but Tanisaro points out, even to Bhikkhu Bodhi, no, don't put body of breath. It's not in the sutras. It's body. So that means that, in fact, Goenka is teaching correctly, and so is Mahasi in the rising, falling, touching, sitting, especially the sitting aspect of it, because it's the whole body that sits. And so getting into the feeling of the understanding of the body as it's just sitting is actually what we would refer to scientifically as the proprioceptive system.
Yeah, so that links with the first foundation of mindfulness, body.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Experiencing the body, precisely.
My question was with which I read from Dhammarato, was to identify, I think it's once you drop off the noting of the breath, to investigate the wholesome qualities that are within the body, including right effort and sati and piti, or anything else that's wholesome coming up. I keep on kind of forgetting about that, to actually investigate the wholesome qualities. I'm just kind of sometimes just accepting it as it is.
Been pissing our time away on the unwholesome quality of hindrances.
Yeah.
Yes, you just led off a very, very good short list of the wholesome qualities to begin to use our mind moments for. Let us have thoughts about that, even to the point of, how is the sati? How has it been for the past few minutes? How is the breathing? Okay, so we take kind of an overview or a manager's view, and then we're looking down on it as a sort of a production facility for Anapanasati, and looking at it that way. Or another way that you could talk about it would be looking at it in the sense of how is the sati in relationship to, is it unremitting? When I'm investigating, is my investigating unremitting? Is this really effortless yet, or is this taking some effort to do still?
Mm.
Okay. And then the next one is yippee ki Really? Yeah, dude. Okay. That's again because it's the investigation. We keep looking at it and say, yeah, this is good stuff. All right. So this is the way that we begin then to practice, is with this additional um, overview of uh, what we're doing in the moment. So this is another or a higher version of the investigation, that we're actually tracking how we're doing with our meditation, taking a look at it, making judgments about it, not in the sense of making it a whipping boy, because always it winds up being, let us kind of say, the information that a pilot would be taking or a co-pilot would be taking in navigating an aircraft. Because he is doing all of this investigation, the ship is smoothly sailing. If when he stops looking at what's going on, that's when it's probably going to take a nosedive. So this becomes kind of par for the course, to get used to paying closer and closer attention to what's going on, which means we spend less and less time in hindrances. And we know that. We know because we've been watching, we've been investigating.
I don't think I have any other points to bring up.
Are you satisfied?
Mostly.
Okay. All right. Well, you're on your way. Practice, practice. And yes, whatever you're unsatisfied with, that whatever doubts you have left, let's bring those up next time.
Yeah.
And so, are you
Okay.
satisfied with where we are now? Really?
Good question. Okay. Thank you,
All right.
Dhammarato. Okay. Goodbye.